Hello, I'm Professor Marcos Navarro. We are going to talk with Antonio Crespo, Chief Executive Officer of Queen for Latin America and Iberia. Hello, Antonio.
Hello.
How's it
going? Nice to meet you and good to be here.
We are going to talk about outsourcing, different trends and the current status in Spain and all around Europe. Queen is developing an outsourcing report annually with Waylane, analyzing the Spanish market. According to this outsourcing report, is the outsourcing growing or is the market is still stuck?
Well, thank you for being here. It's a pleasure for me. Regarding your question, if I think of our report, there's one specific question that we raised to the market itself, and it's about what is their estimation of their outsourcing activity within their companies. And what we see is that there is a big percentage of the respondents, approximately 76% of the respondents are increasing or are planning to increase their outsourcing levels. So what we see is that definitely outsourcing is in an increasing trend. And we also have to bear in mind that there is quite a big difference between the different industries. And what we see is that, for example, industries like pharma, like pharmaceutical companies or like healthcare in general, but also consumer goods and retail and banking and insurance are planning to grow much more than the rest of the industries. And maybe this is because of the level of maturity that they have, which is still lower as compared to the other ones. But I would say that definitely outsourcing is growing, is still growing.
Mm-hmm. And are the buyers having the proper capabilities to manage all the life cycle or not?
Well, one of the questions that we also raise in our report is about the different capabilities that they see, the buyers see for the end users and the end users see for themselves. And what we see is that the buyers, they consider themselves to be, let's say, not so fond of the transition or the transition cycle, you know. And this is something which is, let's say, agreed by the vendors when they evaluate the buyers in their capacities. The other part of the life cycle in which they state that they need more capabilities is on the sourcing strategic part. Mm-hmm. Whereas, for example, for the pure negotiation phase, I mean, the building the RFPs, building the RFIs, and also the contracting phase, they both see that the capacities, they have evolved over the coming years and they are much more prepared than they used to be in the past. One additional thing for me, which is interesting, and it was part of the latest report that we produced last year, was that we asked also about the management of the cybersecurity services. And in this specific topic, what we saw is that both the vendors and the buyers, they evaluate that the buyer capacity is pretty low. And I think that we all agree, you know, that cybersecurity services is probably new in the market. It's something where the buyer, they need to gain much more, let's say, proficiency in the way they manage these cybersecurity services.
So they think that there is a weakness in the cybersecurity services.
Yes, both of them. I mean, the vendors for the buyers and the buyers for themselves. Yes. They think that this is a big weakness in the way they manage these kind of services.
And according to this maturity, you were saying that they are less mature in the strategic and in the transition phase. Are they needing external support, advisory in these parts, or they are lacking this maturity and they are doing by themselves, even though the result?
Well, hopefully yes, because Quint is dedicated precisely to this kind of business. I would say yes, definitely. I mean, the market has changed a lot over the last decade. You know, in the past, in the Latin countries, there used to be a pretty common practice in which you were asking your supplier, your preferred supplier, to build the RFP himself, you know, and now I think that we all accept and we all agree that there needs to be an independency in the way, you know, you manage the whole process. And to be honest, I do believe that because of the complexity of sourcing IT services, complexity, by the way, which is becoming more and more because of the cloud, because the cloud at the end of the day is giving you a lot of different alternatives from a sourcing perspective. And this means that you need a lot of external advice in order to find the proper sourcing for your IT services, because right now the possibilities that you can have to build your IT sourcing are much more than the ones that you had probably 10 years ago.
One of the key topics related to the strategic approach or the strategic definition of the sourcing is the knowledge. What knowledge do you want to keep as a buyer, and what knowledge are you planning to outsource or to leave on the vendor side? Have you find any approach in the report about it?
Well, we don't have such approach in our report, but I can tell you about our experience. And in that sense, I think that there's been a couple of trends that we definitely see in the market. One of them is regarding the pure IT organization itself. And again, I think that this IT organization, it has evolved a lot over the last 10 years. And most of them, they have already become what we call demand supply organizations. Demand supply organizations means that they are brokers in between managing a demand from the business and the supply from external providers. And this has changed a lot, again, over the last decade. So what we see is that, of course, everything which relates to doing, to executing, is of course, has been outsourced over the last years. Whereas things like decision making, more on the thinking side, it's something that you insource. But there's also an additional trend that we have seen, and this is probably part of the digital transformation, in which there's been a lot of new IT functions. And some of these digital functions, let's call it digital instead of IT, but most of these digital functions are embedded in the business itself. So now we see that the business, they have created functions like online channels, like customer experience, like product leadership, and those kind of functions. They, of course, they require a different knowledge, and this knowledge has to be insourced within the organization, because it's probably what links much more into the business strategy of each of those companies.
So IT capabilities are being spread on.
IT capabilities are completely spread throughout the company, and I think that most of the trends that we see, even from a pure organizational perspective in the business, are how to IT needs to be embedded in other functions like marketing, like finance, like HR, and so on.
And what are the key functions that the company are keeping in outsource mode? Or have you seen an insourcing trend during the last few years?
Well, I wouldn't say that there is a specific function apart from the ones that I already mentioned that it's being insourced, I think that the companies are right now in the process of developing all these functions, and they still need, in my opinion, to find a tighter linkage with the business. I mean, this is a subject which is still to be built, and companies are still in the process of finding the right connection between IT and business. It's something that is funny is that when you talk to an IT guy from the IT perspective, we always say that the business is IT. But when you go to the business, sometimes the vision that they have about IT is not similar, so we still have to build this bridge between the two sides. From the side of the IT, it is clear that the business has to be IT. But from the other side, I think that there's still a lot of work to be done, and some of this work is also management of change of the people who are running the business from that perspective, from that part of the bridge.
Yes, there is one trend according to the CIO functions. That is of course, being a broker for all the IT services, keep the knowledge, and to be some kind of beacon, IT beacon, in order to understand how technology is able to habilitate new business or increase the incomes from the business side. Okay.
Yeah. Well, one of the things for me is how to be able to talk in business language. How are you being able to talk about KPIs? How you talk about impact? How you talk about business impact? because it's not about processes. It's not about IT processes. It's not about the way you manage your relationship with your suppliers. It's not about a technical service catalog. It's about the real business service catalog. It's all about, how you create your KPIs, in which one of the additional trends that we see is that, in the past, outsourcing, the key driver for taking outsourcing decisions was the cost. Right now, cost is an important topic, but it's not the most important topic, because we see that, for example, the scalability for the business is the most important reason why companies are deciding for an outsourcing situation. And this means that you have to be able to talk not just about costs and how to make more efficient your IT department, but also how you are contributing to the business results. I mean, not only from, let's say, from the downside, but also how are you able to create and to generate more revenue to your company. And that's something which is difficult, because the language is difficult, words like, for example, one of the things which is currently in the market is agility. But the big question for me is, what does it mean in terms of business results? I mean, because we all agree that companies have to be more agile and so on. Yeah, but what does it mean? I mean, but give me concrete numbers on which are the KPIs. I mean, in terms of revenue, how much additional revenue are you creating? How much cost are you relieving from your organization to add it to the innovation part? And this is for me the key question. And it's not a question easy to be answered. And I can tell you that most of the companies are now in the process to understanding properly what is the impact of managing IT in the right way, not from the cost perspective, from a business perspective.
Okay, Antonio, thank you for your insights and for being here. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you enjoy during these few minutes.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, thank you.